Hello and welcome to the Gorilla Guide webinar to Securing a Remote Workforce. Today's event is brought to you in partnership with Hewlett Packard Enterprise, Phoenix Snap, Wheela, Druva, and Okta. We've got a great event lined up for you. Thank you so much for joining us on this fun, fast-paced Gorilla Guide webisode. I know that you're going to learn a lot. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be serving as your moderator. Before we jump into it, just a few things that you should know about the event. We've got some great prizes. I'll be talking about those in just a moment. Just like the Gorilla Guide book series, we want these events to be educational. We want to help you to solve your IT challenges and get your technology questions answered. This is a hot topic, securing the remote workforce, especially in 2020. Everyone is being forced to do it with a sudden 100%, in many cases, remote workforce. So I know you have a lot of questions. We encourage you to use the questions box there in your audience console on the left-hand side. And we'll be doing dedicated Q&A panel discussions with each one of today's presenters. We also want this to be a social event, and I'll be talking about the hashtag on Twitter for this Gorilla Guide webisode here in just a moment. And then finally, we have a number of resources available in the Handouts tab. We have links, we have PDF assets. I encourage you to check those out before the event ends because they won't be easily accessible after today's webisode. The prizes I'll be announcing on the live event are 3 Amazon $100 gift cards. You must be live in attendance to qualify. And there are a few other legalese, prize terms, and conditions. All prize winners must be able to submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. We'll reach out to prize winners after the event via email. Full prize terms and conditions can be found in the Handouts tab. All prize winners have an option to make a donation equivalent to their prize value to selected charities, including the Diane Fossey Gorilla Fund and the One Tree Planted. These are in partnership with the Gorilla Guide Book Club. You can download and subscribe to free educational IT books at gorilla.guide. The hashtag for today's event on Twitter is Gorilla Guide. You can follow Actual Tech Media and me, David M. Davis, as well over on Twitter. Don't forget to subscribe to all the Actual Tech Media social channels on YouTube, Facebook, and the 10 on Tech podcast. We post all of our latest and greatest content over on LinkedIn, so if you have to pick one, just follow us there. Now, before I introduce you to today's first presenter, let's talk for a moment about today's topic, securing a remote workforce. We're all facing a new reality. For many, work from home was never in the plan. These organizations are scrambling to support their people to come up with policies, VPN connections, security solutions, and work from home devices. Thankfully, there are new technologies that make this a lot easier than in the olden days, if you will. We have security, productivity, scalability, and connectivity challenges that can be handled with newer technology. For most companies, policy frameworks just weren't in place, they weren't ready, they weren't tested when it comes to work from home scenarios. But cybersecurity in 2020 and 2021, with most companies being now 100% remote, many of us have never worked from home before, and we just didn't design the IT organization with 100% work from home in mind. And you can bet that malicious attackers are leveraging this unexpected scenario. Ransomware infections and data breaches are on the rise, and we've got many different technologies at play, virtual desktops via VDI or desktop as a service. We've got multi-factor authentication, distributed backup and data protection solutions, collaboration tools, Slack, Teams, Zoom, and we need reliable access to our data that's scalable, that's efficient, that's highly available, and hyperconvergence can help, as you'll learn about on the event today. You'll also learn about some really innovative security tools that can help you to secure the entire work from home infrastructure. So how will you secure your remote workforce? Well, here's a few tips. First off, don't forgo security for the sake of expediency. Meaning don't rush security. It's important. It shouldn't be an afterthought. Keep in mind that security is always applied in layers. There isn't one silver bullet. You should always think of security like the layers of an onion, where an attacker has to go through barrier after barrier after barrier to attempt to infiltrate your network. You can't just, for example, buy a firewall and be protected. Security tools are crucial, but so is security education. Don't forget to educate your users and your administrators in the process. You should also investigate cybersecurity insurance. More and more companies are choosing to purchase cybersecurity insurance should the worst case scenario apply. And don't forget to look forward to what normal might look like in a year or 2 years or 5 years. Don't anticipate 100% of your workforce being remote forever. And finally, and most importantly for this event, be on the lookout for new and innovative security solutions, data protection solutions, authentication, and monitoring solutions that can help to make all of this far easier than ever before. And with that, let's kick off today's Gorilla Guide webisode with our first presenter. And now I'm excited to introduce Kelsey Nelson, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Okta. Kelsey, it's great to have you on the event today. Take it away.
Alrighty, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to chat a little bit about securing a remote workforce. So to dive right in, I know it's been a crazy past few months here now that we're coming to an end of 2020. And I think while there's been a lot of uncertainty and a lot of challenge over the past year, we have seen a lot of silver lining as well, right? We've seen a lot of rapid work happening from across IT, security, broader workforces as they really enable how to be successful or continue productivity throughout these very challenging times. And what we found too is that this idea of distributed work and being able to work where and how that makes us most productive is likely to persist, right? This quote from the World Economic Forum and Accenture found that more than half of employees felt they could collaborate more easily and more productive at home, while a third are planning to work at home at least one day a week in the future. So this idea that being able to work in a distributed workforce has been successful, I think, for many individuals. And this idea of being able to do so in the future is absolutely something many businesses are starting to explore. Now, at the same time, we've also seen a pretty significant rise in threats and attacks over that same time period, right? These stats should come as no surprise. I think we saw one stat that had over 600% rise in phishing attacks in the first few months of the pandemic. And so how do we start to really wrap our arms around this security challenge, knowing that one, there is still some uncertainty ahead when it comes to distributed work, but two, knowing that we might want to enable some sort of distributed work in perpetuity after hopefully things calm down a bit. And so really what we're hearing from IT and security leaders is, how do I balance this idea of enabling these new ways of working and continuing to deliver on that productivity while managing this continuing security need of a distributed remote workforce? And what we find is that as we start to think through that security challenge, really a lot of what it comes down to is the traditional perimeter, network-oriented perimeter doesn't really exist, right? We have more people accessing more resources for more devices and locations than ever before, which means we have to think about and shift our mindset away from those traditional approaches to security. And a lot of that comes down to ensuring that those users have the right level of access, and we're securing that access to all of those different resources. So when we start to think about how to actually put those things into place, we sort of sequenced it out based on what we're hearing from IT and security leaders on going through that challenge of really protecting that user access. So from left to right, really where we saw many organizations prior to the pandemic was that they had some sort of traditional work environment. Maybe they had some on-prem directory like AD, LDAP. They were starting to adopt cloud applications, so things weren't necessarily integrated, and there was maybe no or limited remote work capabilities. Fast forward to last spring, and what we saw from most businesses was the need to really enable secure remote working fast. And that looked like potentially expanding VPN capacity. It looked like adding MFA to VPN, or any new collaboration tools that were rolled out to enable productivity during that time. And after that firefighting phase, though, is really where we saw organizations and where we see businesses today is how do I start to enhance productivity and really put those pieces into place, knowing that I might want to or need to enable, at least for the near term, some sort of distributed workforce. And I think what we hear too, as we start to think through this challenge, a lot of that ties back to a zero trust approach to security. And so how can we be putting the right foundations into place now that set us up for that modern security approach in the future? Now, there's a lot here. I think as organizations are really starting to grapple with and moving through that stage 2 and those stage 3 projects, we're not going to be able to cover everything in this short session, but what I will touch on briefly is a few of those foundational components, like how can you start to approach automating on and offboarding? So certainly a productivity piece, ensuring users are up and running from day one, but also security, right? We want to make sure they have the right access to the right resources and that we're able to automate removing that access if that user changes roles or leaves the organization. And we'll also touch on some of those context-based access policies. So how can you think about access controls when you don't have the traditional work environment? And we'll touch briefly on how that can tie together for a better user experience. So there's my quick summary. I beat my own slides, but we'll start with that automation, right people, then the context, and then of course making it easier for our end users. I would be remiss, and why am I talking about this if I didn't at least mention, so I'm coming from Okta here, so if you're not familiar, Okta's mission is to enable any organization to use any technology, right? We're in the business of identity management. And so what we mean by this, and when we talk about identity and access management, we talk about it in sort of two flavors. On the right is that computer screen, which is what most folks know us for, which is our workforce identity. So a worker would sign in, they would get access to all of the resources that they need to do their jobs, and that's really where we'll be focused today. We do also, though, have a customer identity platform, which enables you to take those same foundational building blocks of authentication, user store authorization, and put them in the hands of developers as they're building their own customer-facing experiences. So we're going to stick on the workforce side for today and talk through these. So starting off with the right people, the right access from day one. So when we talk about onboarding and offboarding, this is a process that has been very difficult to scale, right? When you start to think about all of the users that need to access all of these different resources and making sure that we have the right resources assigned to the right users from day one, that's a pretty high touch process. And because it's often something that's been done manually, that tends to result in often errors, which tend to correlate with those manual processes. And that gets extremely challenging as your business starts to scale, right? And so the challenge and the burden ends up falling on those IT organizations, as well as the end users who may struggle to get access to the right tools from that first day. And why is that? Now, a part of it is again, that manual piece, but also it's disconnected and unsynchronized across all of those different resources. So if you think about a typical onboarding flow where the user may join the HR team, needs to somehow denote to the IT team, maybe it's through a ticket, it's through email, they send a chat message that this person has joined, and then IT needs to set up access to each and every one of the resources that's appropriate for that person's role. Where we'd like to move to is that we can automate this across a master source. So if you do have an end user joining, maybe if the HR team is putting them into their HR system, can we start to automate it from that first step where the user is created in HR and then move them into and automate access across all of these different resources? And so in doing so, we're able to start to remove some of that manual workload, and it's also keeping that synchronized across every single one of these resources. And ideally, also then if a user were to change or we have some sort of life cycle update within the HR system, we can automate then those changes and all of those downstream apps as well. Now, I can't go into too much depth again, given time, but just to call out, there are a lot of ways you can tackle this. There are some protocols, something like SCIM, that can help you start to automate that from the HR system through something like an identity provider into those downstream apps. We do also have a relatively new solution that makes this really easy to really go into depth with those automated on and offboarding. So certainly being able to not only make sure that that user has access, but that maybe we're assigning them the right territory in something like a Salesforce or setting them up in the right box folders, or sending them a Slack message in the right channels to welcome them to their new team. So being able to do that rich on and offboarding that can not only take that burden off of your IT teams and also help to close some of those security gaps, but really make that day one experience great for your end users. Now, moving quickly, I know, but the next piece I wanted to chat through was sort of that idea of how can we use context to mitigate risk. And so this really, again, I know it ties back to that idea of zero trust, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean zero trust. We want to make sure that our users and our workers are trusted in accessing the tools that they need, but it does mean we do need to rethink some of those traditional approaches to protecting a business, right? So again, I mentioned that at the top of this, we need to move away from that traditional castle and moat style and really start to enable those strong access controls, knowing that who the user is and making sure that it is them before they access a specific resource. So we start to think through this. It really starts with that foundation of ensuring that the user and the device, like what do we know about those two pieces of information, and then combining that with those rich contextual signals. So it could be something, again, we just talked through the user's role, so making sure that they've been assigned the right resources, but what else do I know about that user? Are they a developer? Are they an individual contributor versus a team lead? What resource are they trying to access? And I then need to pair that and compare that with contextual signals from across my security stack. So bringing in, and we particularly have seen a lot of focus on contextual signals from things like the device. What do I know about the device posture, or if the device is managed, has been really key in this distributed work environment. And being able to combine those things to set policies before allowing access into a specific resource. So potentially I only want to allow maybe I want to set granular policies to only allow access into sensitive applications when when the user's on a managed device. Or I just want to say if something is in general anomalous from what I usually detect from my user, then if something is anomalous, then I'll go ahead and prompt for a second factor. So using those different contextual signals, certainly from within the identity provider, but also from across your security stack, will really help give you a more holistic picture of risk before you allow access, which one, makes sure that we're increasing security, but two, also allows you to give more easy and seamless experiences when risk is low. And then lastly, of course, we want to make sure that if we do detect something anomalous from one of these contextual signals, that we're also feeding that into our SIMs and our SOARs so we can start to take action on it if we do see something is amiss. I did want to call out too, we've got a great partnership coalition that we announced a few months ago that really focuses on how can we start to tie together these different solutions. So from endpoint, someone like a CrowdStrike, with the resource itself, with Netscope, and then of course Proofpoint from an email and people-oriented security standpoint, which allows us to really tightly integrate. Just one example of how to approach that modern security stack. And then lastly, I mentioned this, we want to make sure that as we're thinking through the ability to automate provisioning and make sure that it's certainly enhancing security, but also improving our end users' experience. And again, with mitigating risk and bringing those contextual signals, if we know risk is low, let's make it easier for our end users to do their work. Because if we don't, and I think historically we've seen, and yes, this little GIF always gets me, the security hasn't always been in the driver's seat, right? So we've seen that our end users have a tendency to try to circumvent those controls if we don't put those, be thoughtful about the protections and making sure that it's balancing ease of use. And so when you think about the ability to make things easier for your end user and really use security and risk to make things not only improve security, but make things easier, you'll start to see that your users are coming to you and saying, hey, I would like to add this into that same secure system, which in turn gives you more visibility over everything in your enterprise. So as you're starting to think through, just another way to approach this is ensuring that you have sort of a centralized point to bring together certainly all of your cloud applications, but think about extending this to on-prem as well and being able to utilize these resources across all types of devices so that, again, we're really making things better and easier for our end users while protecting your organization. So with that, that was my very brief overview of sort of this next phase of distributed work and how you can think about protecting your business. And really what it comes down to for today's challenge is where to get started. So be it starting more on those automation projects or looking at ways you can better set contextual policies for access controls. Always happy to help. We have a lot more resources on all of these things, but feel free to reach out if you have questions. And thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Kelsey. Very fascinating stuff. We do have some great questions coming in. We'll be queuing these up for the panel discussion coming up. I've just brought up our first poll for everyone out there, and that is, what additional information would you like about the Okta solution? So the options there, data sheet, white paper, feel free to select more than one, pricing information, personal demo. Maybe you just like to try it out for yourself. Sounds like a great solution. And I loved seeing and learning more about it. So again, I'll be queuing up the great questions that have come in. Thank you everyone for those. And we'll be doing our Q&A session here after the next two presentations. So we will be doing a Q&A with Wheela, Dhruva, and Okta. Again, the Gorilla Guide webisode, the format here, short presentations, roughly 10 minutes, followed by panel discussions. And so we'll have 2 panel discussions and 5 expert presentations. All right. So thank you, everyone who responded there to the poll. Also, don't forget about the handouts tab. It's there that you can click on the link. Very first link there goes to Okta, and you can download on that page right there at the top the Secure Remote Work Toolkit ebook. So you can learn all about best practices related to remote work, remote workforce success. So make sure that you check that out before you go. And with that, thank you everyone who responded to the poll. Let's keep the webisode moving here. And with that, we'll move on to our next presentation. I'm excited now to introduce Dilip Advani, Vice President of Marketing at Wheela. Dilip, great to have you. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dilip Advani, and I lead the marketing and product management team at Wheela. And I'm here today to talk to you about how you can manage the new threat landscape for your data center and cloud deployments. Here's a quick introduction to Wheela. We're based in Silicon Valley and have a global partner presence and are also the proud winner for a few industry awards. Our key technologies include the ability for monitoring your environments agentlessly, classifying more than 3,500 different applications, monitoring your environments across the full stack, and then isolating the issue of the problem, and then finally also mapping out all the dependencies automatically for your multi-tier architecture environment. Before we talk about how to go about protecting things in your environment, you must know what to protect, right? Obviously, there are 2 main areas, right? One is the user who could be working remotely, in this case, with everybody working from home, right? And there obviously are many ways to protect them using antivirus or other agent-based software, right? But the more important aspect, right, and that is what we will focus on today, is the infrastructure that is running the mission critical applications. So we'll be focusing more about the protection for those critical applications. In the past, right, organizations have protected their critical infrastructure and applications with the typical castle and moat type of a security apparatus, right? So you defend the perimeter and then assume everything that's already inside does not pose a threat and is therefore cleared for access and can move about very freely. So when applied to your environment, right, this would be your firewall for the perimeter protection. and as well as a combination of your host protection with agent-based software installed as well. But that does not work quite well in today's environment, right? As firewalls can be compromised, they can be bypassed with misconfigurations, stolen credentials, right? While the agent-based host monitoring can also be disabled by modern-day malware. Once inside, right, the malware's goal is to stay undetected for as long as they can and to also cause maximum damage or steal as much confidential data as they can, right? So the attack, once inside, right, typically these days will try to move in this lateral or east-west direction within your deployment and then finally look at exfiltrating the data, right? Uh, let's go ahead and actually take a look at that as to how that would map to a typical cyber kill chain that is quite famous in the industry, right? You can also see that the attacks may call for subtle changes to application dependencies in a multi-tier application that must be tracked. And yes, as you know, right, microsegmentation will help to some extent, right, but will not stop all the compromises that could be taking place within your environment. So you need to use both, right, microsegmentation and a threat detection solution so that you understand what workloads were introduced, what protocols um, were in use, right? Did something change in the environment? Was it really a misconfiguration, right, by the IT employee, right? Or is it a real attack as such? And then finally, you also need to know what data is being exfiltrated out, right? So this could include, like I mentioned earlier, right, your confidential data that's being exfiltrated out, or as part of certain attacks, right? Especially the command and control based attacks, right, where the malware or the attack, right, goes out to this command server to get the next set of commands to continue executing the attack within your environment, right? So being able to identify any exfiltration, whether it's of your confidential information that your organization cares about, right, or it is part of some command and control stuff, right? Identification of that is going to be very, very critical, right? So what you need to do as a security organization is to move away from that castle and moat type of philosophy, right? And then make the assumption that anybody can be a threat unless proven otherwise. So that is why at Wheeler, right, we've brought our unique application-centric solution to be a force multiplier for security monitoring with a lot of specific details that are going to be very helpful for that threat detection, right? The first, and we'll take a look at this in a live demo as well, right? The first of it is the detailed application anomalous behavior identification, right? It's also the identification of the lateral east-west traffic movement that's taking place within your environment, right? And also the identification of any cyber threats, right, that exist uh, that are attacking your environment at this time, or vulnerabilities that may exist in your environment, and then the data exfiltration activities, and then finally also collect forensic evidence, right, which is this conclusive chain of evidence for any threat for further forensic analysis. So now actually let's take a look at this in a live demo, right? So within the Wheeler solution, you can monitor that east-west lateral movement of traffic between the VMs. You can see information on what protocol or application is being used, how much traffic sent from A to B and B to A, right? You have those details. You can also, with Wila's cyber threat monitoring capabilities, you can track the application anomalous behavior for your multi-tier applications, right? And this is done once you've set your baseline, right? So for your multi-tier application groups, once you set your baseline, you can actually go ahead and see those deviations, right? And you can see this in a table format, right, where we're tracking every single chain, as well as on a map with these blue lines, right, indicating anomalous behaviors, right? So these are dependencies or even assets that were not originally seen in the baseline. So this way you are able to visualize the entire attack surface to assess your level of exposure and then also uncover any indicators of compromise there. You also have insight into thousands of threats like malware, ransomware, command and control stuff, OS fingerprinting stuff, web shells, right? Where you get a list of all of those attacks. But the thing that sets Wila apart is the application-centric view, right, that we bring to the table, right, that helps reduce that alert fatigue that security and network professionals always complain about, right? Too many blinking lights, everything needs my attention, right? So what we do is we help you focus on what security threats matter to you at that very moment based on the impact on the infrastructure and the application workload, right? So you can see, right, which is the compromised asset, right? And then who is it connected to, right? Who else is dependent on it, right? Or who is it dependent on? And you can see if there's newer connections, if there's data transactions that are taking place between the compromised host and your critical servers or VMs within your environment, right? And you can also see the impact, right? If it's some sort of a denial of service attack, you can see the impact an attack has on the infrastructure. And then finally, right, you can also see if data is being exfiltrated out from your data center and sent to places where it's not supposed to go. On a world map, you can get details about those external transactions that are taking place, and you can save that those transactions as well as the packets as forensic evidence. That's all I have as a quick demo. So if I switch back, right, lastly, like as a special offer for all of today's attendees, I also wanted to let you know that you have an opportunity to get a $50 Amazon gift card to attend a separate intro demo call over Zoom with the Wila technical expert team, right? So you can send us an email at sales@wila.com to request that. Thank you, everyone.
Always an excellent presentation, Dilip. And also, thank you for taking time to do a demo there and just show us how powerful Wila is. I brought up the poll question for everyone out there. What additional information would you like about the Wila solution? One of the things I do know from seeing multiple demos of Wila is that the user interface is just so beautiful. I'm a fan of nice user interfaces that are well designed, well thought out, easy to use, and visually very appealing. And I can definitely say that about the Wila tool. The cool thing is it's all software. You download it, you point it to the device it's going to collect data from, and it just starts, bringing in valuable information and showing you what's going on with the network and the virtual infrastructure. So a very cool, very powerful tool. Wila, thank you for being on the event today. Just a few more seconds here to answer the poll for anyone out there. If you haven't done so yet, we do appreciate that. And also, of course, check out the link in your audience console there to the Wila website, which will, if you request an intro meeting, it says you will get a $50 Amazon gift card. So, hey, you can't beat that. It sounds like a great opportunity. Make sure that you check that out. It's right there in the handouts tab. That's the special link. I will, in fact, copy it and paste it into the questions box as well, just for anyone else who didn't notice it in the handouts. So make sure that you don't miss that special offer. And with that, let's go ahead and move on now to our next presentation. I'm excited to introduce Mr. W. Curtis Preston, Chief Technical Evangelist at Druva. Curtis, great to have you on. Take it away.
Hi, I'm W. Curtis Preston, Chief Technical Evangelist here at Druva, and welcome to this presentation. It's called Protecting a Mobile Workforce, and I would say especially in time of COVID. The reality is that due to the coronavirus and other things that are happening, more data is being created outside the data center than ever before. This is obviously especially true due to coronavirus because everyone, including myself right now, sitting here in my home making this presentation, we are a mobile workforce. Everyone is on a laptop. Everyone is a mobile worker. This idea of being in a building has become passé, to say the least, and I think that will continue even after things return to the new normal. I think there will be many more mobile workers than before. The other thing is that there are multiple SaaS apps, right, that companies are using. They are using more SaaS apps, and more companies are using the popular SaaS apps than ever before. And unfortunately, much of this data is unprotected, and therefore, I think it's the perfect time to try data protection as a service. The first really important thing, I think, for you to walk away here is that understanding that your SaaS applications are not being backed up. Assuming that they're being backed up is a very dangerous proposition indeed. Gartner agrees with this. The NCSC in the UK agrees with this. The thing is that the recycle bins, file synchronization software, all of these different things, they are not backup. They don't conform. The biggest thing for me is that they don't conform with what we call the 3-2-1 rule. At least 3 versions of something that you're protecting, 2 of which, on 2 different media, 1 of which is somewhere else. And the thing is that the things that are being offered inside products like Microsoft 365, Salesforce, G Suite, etc., they conform to the 3. They give you the versioning, but they do not give you the offsite protection, which is required for a basic definition of backup. There are 5 reasons why someone would want to protect end-user data, right? The obvious here is data deletion, corruption, or loss. There are all kinds of things, we call it fat fingering, right? I type something in a file that I didn't mean to and it gets saved. Or I delete a file, right? There are all sorts of things. Or maybe you lose your laptop, or you lose your mobile device, right? The other is ransomware attacks. And, you'd have to be hiding under a rock to not be aware of this particular reason. The ransomware attacks are becoming more and more common, and even more so during this time of COVID, unfortunately. The other is e-discovery and legal hold, right? So your company or your governmental entity can be sued for the activities of somebody within your organization, and your ability to discover this information is way easier if you're doing protecting that end user data. If you're not, satisfying an e-discovery request can actually be quite problematic. The other thing is data governance and compliance. There may be, there probably are, thanks to things like GDPR and CCPA, there are regulations that apply to almost every company or governmental entity, and you need to make sure that you are complying with it. And complying with things like that is much easier if you're protecting that end user data. And then finally, these devices that we talk about, it's easier to manage the life cycle of those devices if you're protecting the data. If you lose a device, or if it catches fire or gets dropped in a pool or something, anything that happens where you need to replace the device is so much easier if you've been protecting the data on that device. I myself have had my laptop replaced, I think twice, since I've worked at Druva now for 3 years, and each time, just magic happens and the data that was there is now there again. So what is Druva's solution to this problem? Druva offers a single unified data protection system for all end user data. And this includes both endpoints, which is both things like laptops and mobile devices, but then also SaaS services. So we can protect data from Salesforce, which is increasingly becoming a valuable part of the workforce, Slack, G Suite, Office 365, now rebranded Microsoft 365, and protect all of that to a single, secure, scalable SaaS platform. We always start with backup and restore. That is the sort of the first thing that we're doing for everything. And then the other thing is that we're able to preserve users. So if you delete a user because they have left the company, their backup data can still stay present within the backup system. So you can still do restore older files, and also, just as important, do e-discovery against those older files and emails and things like that. Ransomware recovery becomes really simple. It's just simply a matter, like if it's a laptop, wiping that laptop or shipping a new laptop to somebody, and then they just have to basically log in as themselves, and magically that data, their data then is automatically recovered to that device. Also, we actually actively monitor for ransomware, and we can actually notice when a device has been infected with ransomware based on using machine learning algorithms to detect that kind of activity. Also, search and audit and legal hold, those things become much easier. You can do a unified search across all devices, all endpoints, as well as other end user data that you're protecting. It's the most robust data protection platform. So really important, it does provide that 3-2-1. It does provide that data isolation, making sure that your protection data is completely separate from the data that you are protecting. The data is immutable in that it cannot be changed by a third party. You can either store the data indefinitely, or you can do customized retention for different data sets in order to comply with any regulations or your own personal business practices. And really importantly, the administration of this system is led by IT. Many of these file synchronization softwares and other system things like, say, Time Machine to back up a laptop, for example, it's not led or managed by the central IT department, whereas this would be. And you have granular and flexible recovery options, everything from recovering an entire laptop or an entire user or an entire account in one of the SaaS operations to individual files or emails or things like that. I mentioned already that we protect Microsoft 365, G Suite, Salesforce, Slack, all of these things. And when I look at specifically Microsoft 365, G Suite, and Salesforce, for each of them, there have been a major incident within the last 2 years where customers of those, one or more customers, lost a significant amount of data that they wouldn't have lost if they had been backing them, their system up with the kind of software kind of system that we offer. So if you're unfamiliar with Druva, we have over 4,000 enterprise customers. We're built natively on top of AWS. That's where our technology happens to run. Don't worry, you do not need an AWS account in order to use our service, but that is where our service runs. And we have over 150 petabytes of data under management. So this is just a quick list of many of our customers. You should recognize a number of big names there. I think one of the things to take away from this particular slide is that sometimes people ask, what industry does your product work well in? Well, for us, it's kind of all of them, right? If you've got data, especially if you've got mobile data, if you've got end user data, we can protect it, and really it doesn't matter, where that data comes from or what type of company happens to be creating that data. We can protect that data regardless of the user. So just in summary, Druva offers data protection for the cloud era. I focus this presentation mainly on protecting the mobile workforce, which is about laptops and SaaS services. I will just very briefly mention that we also provide data protection for cloud workloads such as AWS, and also for data center workloads such as VMware and Hyper-V. And with that, I think I will end this part of the presentation, and we will head on over to questions.
All right, great presentation as always, Curtis. So good to have you on. We will be doing our panel discussion here with all the questions that have come in, happening right now. Hey, it's coming up. Curtis was right. So thank you everyone for the excellent questions. It is now time to kick off our panel discussion. Actually, before we do, I want to give everyone a few more seconds out there to respond to the poll question. We do appreciate your responses. I don't want to move on too fast here. Great questions coming in here. I see from Lee, Jason, Shane, Rodney. Thank you so much for those. I will be forwarding all those to Curtis here for our Q&A. If anyone's having trouble with the poll, if it seems stuck, push refresh on your web browser. 99% of the time that will resolve it. Also try, make sure you're using Chrome as your recommended web browser, or Firefox as a backup. All right, thank you everyone who responded to that. It's now time for our live panel discussion, where we're going to take your questions, and we'll be chatting now with Kelsey Nelson from Okta, Dilip Advani from Wheela, and W. Curtis Preston from Druva. And with that, let's kick it off. First question for you, Curtis, and they're asking why, if it's important to back up Microsoft 365 and Office 365 and similar services, why are there some experts out there that recommend not backing up these types of services?
This is a tough one because these are smart people that differ in opinion here. I would simply say that I don't think it's rude to say these people, there are specialists in Microsoft 365. I'm a specialist in backup. I have been in backup for over 25 years now. And one thing, the thing is that these people that feel that you don't need to back up something like Microsoft 365, they often mention, well, if this happens, you can do this. If this happens, you can do this. What they often don't think of or don't think about, I don't think, are the things that they don't think about. So one of the things that I mentioned is, there's the famous, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio, right? I think I got that quote right. I just like to say there are more things in SaaS, more bad things that can happen in your data or to your data than you can think of right now. Just because you can think of how to deal with the solutions or the problems that you can think of doesn't mean that there are not scenarios. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but just trust me, there are things. In fact, we had an entire podcast just a few weeks ago. We have a podcast called No Hardware Required here at Druva. We have an entire podcast where we have a Microsoft 365 expert that went through a number of scenarios of things that can happen, and specifically in Microsoft 365, where if you didn't back them up, you wouldn't be able to recover from those scenarios. You would have to recreate that data. And again, this isn't a slam against Microsoft 365. It's true of any SaaS platform of which I am aware. They do not offer backup as part of their service. Look at your service agreement. You will not find backup or restore in there anywhere.
Very fascinating, Curtis. Thank you so much for that answer. Let's move on to our next question. This one's for you, Dilip. And the question is Wheela an agentless or agent-based solution?
Willa is a totally agentless solution in the data center, right? So we get installed as a VM. So there's no special approval needed from application owners. So you can monitor any application, whether it's third-party applications, custom applications, SaaS applications, right? And if you want to see if they're getting attacked and stuff, right? So being agentless makes the rollout very efficient, makes it very fast, and very cost effective as well.
Thank you, Dilip. Agentless solutions are so much easier to manage, so I appreciate that. Next question is for you, Kelsey. And the question is, what HR systems does Okta integrate with?
Yeah, great question. So Okta has a number of integrations for that HR-driven provisioning. So Workday is absolutely one. We do have other integrations with vendors like Bamboo, namely SuccessFactors and UltiPro. And I think there's a full list on okta.com if you have others that you want to take a peek at.
Thank you, Kelsey. A lot of different integration options there. I appreciate that. Let's move on to the next question, and that one's for you, Curtis. And the question is, let's say when we're talking about laptop protection for our remote workers, if they use OneDrive to protect the files on their laptop, do they still need additional laptop data protection?
The problem with using OneDrive or Google Drive, any of these sort of file or Dropbox, any of these file synchronization products, there's nothing wrong with those products, but they're more about collaboration than they are about backup. One of the really important things to understand here is that there's no centralized reporting and management of that tool. So if something is happening with your file synchronization process, there is nothing that would notice that from an IT perspective. This is why I mentioned earlier about that with the Druva solution, it's managed centrally by the IT department. That isn't the case for OneDrive or Google Drive or any of those file synchronization processes. That's the biggest issue I have, is that they're not centrally managed and reported on. And the fact that when you're talking about anywhere from dozens to hundreds to thousands, we have customers that have over 100,000 laptops that are being protected with our product. When you have that many people, the really bad things can happen to the synchronization process that you have no idea about. And the only time you're going to find out was when something bad happens on a laptop and then you go to restore it. So no, I do not think that file synchronization products are a good way to back up.
Thank you, Curtis. Excellent answer. Very insightful. Next question over to you, Dilip. And they're asking, how does Wela know what applications are actually running in the environment?
That's a really good question. We perform deep packet inspection, and we actually look at the packets in your environment and then apply our application classification on top of that allows us to classify more than 3,500 applications automatically. And this includes your web applications, your database applications, SaaS applications, ERP applications, healthcare, financial, industrial, building automation applications, right? Any of those things can be classified automatically.
Very smart approach, Dilip. Thank you. Next question for you, Kelsey. And they're asking about what are some other popular context policies for remote work. Can you help them out there?
So I think what we've seen and what we've heard sort of anecdotally has been a lot around how can I start to really elevate, I think, device posture and device, whether or not the device is managed, have been really some of the big ones we've heard questions about recently. And I think in the Zero Trust survey that we ran earlier this year that we saw a shift in even prior to COVID. So I'll call those out. We do also see lots of, certainly we have a somewhat recent integration with Proofpoint from an email security. That one's been, Proofpoint can see the most targeted users in your organization. So you can set policies against that very attacked person or VAP list.
Thank you, Kelsey. Great answer. Next question back to you, Curtis. I like this one. They say, hey, hasn't everybody already moved to the cloud? Why do I need to be doing these local backups like on a laptop at all?
Well, if you are using a Chromebook, then I will probably agree with you. A Chromebook basically is nothing but a cache of the data that is stored in Google Cloud. But if you're using a Windows or Linux or Windows or Mac, sorry, if you're using Windows, Linux, or Mac laptop, there are a number of issues with not protecting that. The biggest of which is really just people, right? That even if you, let's say you don't agree with me regarding the OneDrive, and you say, well, we tell people that we use OneDrive, even with the limitations that I mentioned, we use OneDrive, and we tell them if a file matters, they need to save it in their OneDrive folder. Well, that's really the problem there, is that they might not save it in the OneDrive folder. The tools that are built within even the Microsoft suite of tools, which I'm quite familiar with, they don't default to saving things there. They default to saving things wherever the default thing is. And yes, maybe you can change that, but it's really easy to get around that. And people, they're not thinking, the average user is not thinking about, well, I need to save this file in this place so that it gets backed up. The average user is simply not thinking about that. And so I would like to suggest that if you are using laptops that are using things like Windows or Mac OS, then your users, just acknowledge the fact that your users are creating some data that is on those laptops that needs to be protected. And really the only way to protect that data is to have an actual backup client running on that laptop that is then saving that data. And yes, I do think that the easiest way to do that is to do that to a data protection service.
Thank you, Curtis. Excellent point. Next question goes back to Dilip. Dilip, they're asking, can Wheela predict which assets will be targeted in the IT environment?
Absolutely. As Wheela does dependency mapping, we know all the assets and the connections or dependencies between them, right? So that way we know once an asset is compromised, and that's what I showed you during the demo as well, right? So you know exactly which other assets that compromised host, server, or VM is connected to, right? So for example, if it's connected to your critical database server, right, that could be compromised next, because that could be the ultimate target for the attacker, right? And then we'll also show you all the transactions between them.
Very cool. I love the idea of being able to predict which assets will be targeted by attackers. Thank you, Dilip. Next question back to you, Kelsey. And they're asking, what other endpoint vendors does Okta integrate with?
And I'm guessing this is referring to, I called that slide out about the Spectre Alliance, which has an integration and talks about our partnership with CrowdStrike. And so we absolutely do integrate with other endpoint vendors. So a few other examples, folks like Jamf, Mobile Iron, VMware, Carbon Black, are a few other examples. So if you do have more questions, again, Okta.com, the Okta Integration Network should give you the full list of who we integrate with.
Thank you, Kelsey, and thank you to Okta. And with that, the last question goes back to you, Dilip, and that is, can Wheela monitor users who are working from home, for example, using VDI?
That's another great question. We can absolutely do that, right? Especially on the VDI front, right? With the remote workforce, right? With all of us like working from home, right? So we identify all the users, their sessions, what applications are being used by those users, websites visited, right? And many other things, right? So also with identifying any anomalous behavior there, we also monitor those the performance of those remote users as they access the critical applications back in the data center. And then we also pinpoint where the bottlenecks lie, right? So again, Wheela is a full stack solution, looks at the performance aspect as well as the cyber threat challenges that occurs, right? So whenever you have an outage, right, you don't know whether it's truly due to a performance issue or it is attack as such, right? So that's why having a single solution that does that makes it very effective for organizations.
Thanks, Dilip, and thank you to Wheela. Thank you to Dhruva, and again, thank you to Okta. Really excellent Q&A panel discussion. I appreciate all the great questions and all the great answers. And with that, let's keep this event moving on to the next session. And now I'm excited to introduce you to our next presenter. That is Vinay Janakudi, Senior Manager for Technical Marketing at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Great to have you, Vinay. Take it away.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hopefully, wherever you are, you're safe. Today, I'm going to be talking about end user computing and how HP Simplicity provides a solution for customers. More and more people right now are actually working remotely because of COVID. And a lot of these remote workers need an environment where they can access their infrastructure, but also need to actually adhere to compliance that is provided by organization. And for the IT admin, he needs an infrastructure that is easy to scale, but also cost efficient. So VDI has been providing a great solution for that to solve these needs for the long time. Now, adoption of VDI has been increasing over the last couple of years. And there is a notion that by 2023, you'll probably have about $11 billion of market for end user computing. For a lot of customers who are looking for an end user computing solution, hyperconverged infrastructure has been providing a very rapidly growing infrastructure because it provides all the components that are needed to scale your infrastructure, whether it's compute and storage linearly and independently. When an IT admin is looking at deploying an infrastructure to provide for their end users, there are a lot of user expectations that have to be taken into consideration, whether it's reliability, always on experience, or an ability to actually access those applications very easily without impacting the overall user experience. But then the business also needs to make sure that all that people are accessing is security and also compliant without actually adding a lot of cost and making sure that you have a return on investment on those investments that you're making on end user computing. And then the IT team that is really deploying this wants that infrastructure to not be difficult to manage, but also have the ability to scale very easily and be able to sustain that needs, such as demands and spike, whether it's the early morning, the first time the whole team logs in, or having the ability to restore the data or the availability of data all the time. So there are a lot of these things that have to be taken into consideration when customers are looking to create an end user computing solution for their remote workers. Now, all of these come with different compromises that you have to make, but finding the right solution is very important. And HP Simplicity provides a perfect solution for VDI because HP Simplicity is easy to deploy and scale. Being a hyper-converged infrastructure, we have everything that you need in a data center collapsed into a server, wherein we provide you the compute and the storage that is needed, and customers can actually get up and running in less than 2 hours, including deploying their VDI infrastructure on top of it. And then if they need to scale their infrastructure, whether it's compute or storage, you can scale them linearly. We also have an ability to scale your compute independent of your storage, providing a lot of flexibility for customers. Now, performance is very important, and also resiliency is also very important. And Simplicity provides a very resilient infrastructure, also making sure that performance is not compromised. And especially when you're deploying a VDI infrastructure, you're going to need an infrastructure that allows you to have backups for your data, especially people who are using those persistent desktops, which they have been working on all their data, and they don't want to lose the data when the connection goes out. And another important thing that customers need is an ability or a proof that the applications can run without having any compromise. Now, for that, we actually have proven that we have validated all our solutions through Login VSI, which is the third party which validates our infrastructure with Horizon View and Citrix, providing customers the confidence that these applications have been tested and proven for them to confidently deploy on top of Simplicity. We have just not stopped there. Everything that we do, we're trying to continue to update and maintain our collateral so that the customers can leverage this, and also trying to find integration points, whether it's trying to create plugins, wherein we have created a Citrix workspace plugin, wherein the customers who are deploying their VDI workers on-prem but want to have the ability to manage their infrastructure through a public cloud interface, we make that integration very seamless by providing you a plugin as well as a way to manage and orchestrate that whole deployment as well. And Simplicity also has a tool called Rapid DR, which provides you the ability to do an automatic disaster recovery. So all in all, for Simplicity provides a perfect solution for customers looking for a VDI offering today. Touching on some of the key components that really help drive the conversations and proof points for customers is initially, most of the customers who are doing deployments of VDI in their infrastructure want to start small and scale as their needs grow. So Simplicity provides that ease of deployment, but also you can just start with just 2 nodes, wherein you can start with just a proof of concept. But as you're rolling out your infrastructure and having a lot of users start leveraging your VDI infrastructure, you can scale them linearly and also make sure that your performance is maintained and no impact to your users. Next is the ability to scale compute. Usually with Simplicity, hyper efficiency is at the core at what we do, wherein we dedupe, compress, and optimize data at inception for the lifecycle of the IO, providing a lot of efficient data so that people are not saving a lot of data on their infrastructure because all of the data is deduplicated. So most of the customers actually run out of compute resources before they actually reach the limits on their storage. So we have an ability where you can scale compute independent of storage, which provides the ability for customers to just leverage any SXI host in their infrastructure to add compute resources while still leveraging the Simplicity's data and storage capabilities to manage their infrastructure. And performance is also key. And with Simplicity, we have this no knobs concept where customers can actually get the same level of performance when they scale their infrastructure or even with their bootstraps, making sure that the overall experience of all the users when they're accessing their infrastructure on Simplicity have a consistent performance throughout. Now we have different hardware platforms wherein customers can choose depending on their needs. And we have this t-shirt sizing wherein depending on the number of desktops that are needed for customers to run on their infrastructure, they can choose whether it's a 380G platform, starting from 375 desktops, all the way to 1,875 desktops on their large node infrastructure. We recently also announced our DL325, which is an AMD platform, which is single use system, which provides twice the density on a single server, and you can scale the DL325 also with compute and storage nodes up to 1,800 desktops. Now, all of this is great, and these are capabilities that the Simplicity natively provides, and we integrate and support all the features that customers are looking for VDI, whether it's persistent desktops, non-persistent desktops, linked clone, fast clone. We support all the capabilities that we need. But the real benefit that we see and the happiness we get is when customers are actually able to get the benefit of the platform. Now, here is a customer, Migros is a supermarket, wherein they were actually looking for a VDI solution during the time of COVID, and they were actually able to deploy Simplicity in their infrastructure and started to see a lot of benefit to their end users as well. So they were able to deploy, they were initially running 300 desktops, and they were able to spin up another 700 desktops for their employees, especially in the time of COVID, without causing any impact. So great use case customer there. Another big customer that has been using Simplicity is like Pitt, Ohio, which is a supply chain customer who has 3,600 employees, and they are actually deploying Simplicity with Citrix, and they have 21 Simplicity nodes deployed across 2 data centers, where they actually were able to double their whole VDI work from home users after COVID and getting the benefit of the efficiency, the availability, and performance that Simplicity provides. So in summary, HP Simplicity provides a perfect solution for VDI, wherein all our platforms are validated by login via site to check for login storms, as well as how fast we can provision the desktops. And also with Simplicity, you get the OpEx and CapEx benefits because of our hyper efficiency, and customers have the flexibility to linearly scale their infrastructure. And finally, without compromising on performance and resiliency with VDI, but also with other applications that they need to run in their infrastructure. Thank you.
All right, excellent presentation, Dilip. Thank you so much. I've just brought up the next poll question. What additional information would you like about the HPE solution? And I'll leave that up for a few moments here while I announce our first Amazon $100 gift card. That is going to Dick Burgess from California. Congratulations to Dick Burgess from California. We've still got 2 more gift cards to give out at the end of the event, which is coming up here very shortly after we just have one more presentation and then one more panel discussion. So then we'll have our 2 additional gift card prizes announced. Keep sending in all the great questions. Thank you. We've got our panel discussion with Hewlett Packard Enterprise and Phoenix Snap coming up after our next presentation. So keep those good questions coming. All right, I'll give you just a few more moments here to answer the poll question. We do appreciate those responses. And of course, I want to remind you to check out the handouts tab. It's there that you'll find a handout on the HPE SimpliVity solution. It's a PDF that you can download and check out after today's event. All right, thank you everyone who responded to that poll. We do appreciate it. And now it's time to move on. I'm excited to introduce you to our next presenter, welcoming Mr. William Bell, Executive Vice President of Products at Phoenix Snap. William, take it away.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Gorilla Guide webisode on securing a remote workforce. My name is William Bell, Executive Vice President of Products at Phoenix Snap. And today I'm going to share with you guys a few practical tips to make sure that your remote workforce stays secure in these changing business times and how people are working more from home. For those of you that are not familiar with Phoenix Snap, we are a global infrastructure as a service company delivering a slew of infrastructure products around the globe. We've been in business for about 10 years. We've got amazing partners and collaborators that we're working with to build intense, secure, compliant, and high performance critical applications in the cloud. I mentioned our global footprint. Today we have services live in 16 data centers. 10 of those are mostly network POPs, but we're expanding service availability every single day. We're focused on delivering high performance and availability. We talk a lot about our 100% uptime guarantee. And today, our network exceeds over 2.35 terabits per second. So a lot of capacity in there for folks to do different business things and drive different types of outcomes for their company. So the focus of this presentation, we're going to talk about some of the challenges that exist with remote work. Some of you have been working on these for many, many years that have adopted primarily distributed workforce scenarios for their business. But a lot of you have been thrust into this due to COVID. And it's creating immense challenges for your company and for those of you in technology to deliver a consistent, secure, remote work environment for your employees. And so I wanted to walk through, some of the issues that exist, and it starts with the people. So ultimately, you have to drive security awareness into your organization. You have to make sure that they understand that security is everyone's problem and that everyone has to work together to make things better. As a technologist, you can implement a lot of policies and controls to ensure secure access for your organizations, but you don't have unlimited budgets. You have to sometimes do with what you got. And I know that's hard because you're also faced with staffing challenges that make your life even more difficult. So we've got a few lists here of common remote work cyber threats. And a lot of times they're similar to the threats that exist for any user from any device, whether it's on-prem, in an office, or from home. But what I can say is that a lot of these threats have intensified, specifically as a lot of organizations moved to adopting BYOD and multifunction, pieces of equipment for their users. Their customers, your end users and employees are leveraging personal devices a lot of times to access critical and secure information that needs to be protected and is simultaneously being exposed to things that a lot of times your desktops in the office weren't exposed to. So you're working hard to make sure that you've got all of these things under control. And I'm going to share a couple practical tips to make some of that better. So it starts with things like antivirus and anti-malware, making sure that it can exist on any type of device, right? Android phones, Mac computers, home laptops, whatever. In implementing multi-factor authentication authorization is a no-brainer. You have to implement these types of technologies to ensure that passwords are not what stands between an attacker and your critical data. Building a robust either remote desktop or secure VPN capability. A lot of people are looking at this, and the marketing term is kind of shifting towards secure access or SASE. You have to have some type of secure modality for people to connect to your organization. Getting tough on your network segmentation is an immense challenge, but it is necessary. You have to make sure that your network is your critical networks are highly segregated from the end users that are browsing, some shopping portal on their laptop when they're at home. And you've got to find ways to monitor all this. You have to be in a position to, even as you try to enable and empower, you have to monitor and detect and prevent. So there's a lot more things on this list. Give it a read, and hopefully some of this works for you. But if all that fails, and some of it will, sometimes something's going to happen, you have to make sure that your critical data is protected. You have to make sure that you have consistent, secure copies and backups of your critical data for compliance reasons, for business continuity reasons, and for data protection and anti-ransomware reasons. I think that's one of the biggest ones. Ransomware is eating people's lunch these days. So you have to have something in place. And PhoenixNAP and Veeam have partnered together to make these solutions real for organizations, to be able to protect your critical data anywhere it resides, in public cloud, hybrid cloud, your data center, endpoints, wherever that data is, it has to be protected. And part of that protection is ensuring that it's not just protected on some sand in your environment, but that you're following the 3-2-1 rule and you've got an offsite copy of that data that is also protected and is managed centrally by your organization. So take a look at the slide here. There's a lot to kind of consume, but the key points are: back up your critical data, make sure at least one of those copies is offsite. PhoenixNAP has some great solutions for both offsite backup and always on disaster recovery. And we're doing a lot more work past that. Software as a service is getting big. Office 365 is huge. And you have to make sure that you protect that data yourself. So if you want to get in touch with us, please feel free to contact us at any of the locations here. Again, my name is William Bell, and thank you guys so much for spending time with us during this Gorilla Guide webisode.
Great presentation, William. Thank you so much. Really insightful. I've just brought up the poll question for everyone out there that says, what additional info would you like about the Phoenix Snap solution? I'll leave that up here for a moment, let everyone answer that so that we can move on to our Q&A panel discussion coming up here with William and with HPE, Vinay from HPE. So lots of good questions coming in. I've been queuing those up for William and for Vinay as well. I want to remind everyone again about the handouts tab. It's there that you'll find information from Phoenix Snap on their data protection solution powered by Veeam. So make sure that you check that out before you go. Might answer some of the questions that have come in as well. All right. Thank you, everyone who responded to that poll. We do appreciate it. And now it's time for our second Q&A panel discussion. I'm excited to bring back Vinay from Hewlett Packard Enterprise and William from Phoenix Snap. Vinay, this question's for you. They're asking, what's the biggest benefit that customers get when deploying VDI on SimpliVity?
So it's a combination of a couple of things. It's the hyper efficiency, especially VDI workers have a lot of common data. So with SimpliVity, the amount of data you store on your infrastructure is minimized. So you get a lot of OpEx and CapEx savings, but also with our validation with Login VSI, customers are actually getting benefits from a performance, whether it's the login storms, when they want to log in multiple users simultaneously, also the performance in which they're able to access the applications. So all in all, everything that they need to run on SimpliVity to manage the VDI infrastructure, they're getting a huge benefit on performance, availability, resiliency, and also efficiency.
Thanks, Vinay. Great answer there. The next question is for you, William. They're asking, do you offer free trials for Veeam backup and replication services?
That's a great question. We absolutely offer and encourage free trials of all of our Veeam backup and data protection solutions, whether that's disaster recovery or backup as a service, offsite backup. Our customers and prospects are encouraged to make sure it works for their organization before signing up, and we will walk you through that process and make it simple for your organization.
Very nice. That's a great way to try out the product and do a proof of concept. Vinay, next question for you. They're asking if HPE SimpliVity supports Citrix Workspace.
Definitely. We actually have gone a step further in supporting Citrix Workspaces because Citrix is a very critical partner for us, wherein we have worked with them to create a plugin within vCenter to automate the whole setup of the infrastructure needed to manage your on-prem infrastructure. So we actually have a plugin that integrates well, and we have customers using Citrix Workspace on top of SimpliVity today.
Very nice. William, back to you. In the next question, they're asking, what's the pricing structure for Veeam backups and disaster recovery?
We've worked really hard to ensure that our pricing structures are easy to consume. And so when we're talking about offsite data protection or backup as a service, our Veeam powered backup as a service product is priced just per terabyte. So let us know how much data you need to back up in the cloud. We'll give you a price per terabyte. There's no bandwidth fees. There's no licensing fees. It's just based on how much data you're storing. And when it comes to disaster recovery as a service, we've worked really hard to make that simple too. And we have two line items that we're looking for. How many virtual machines do you have? And how much data is on those virtual machines and how much the size of those VMs essentially. So how many VMs and the total size of those VMs, those are all the data points we need to provide a quick and cost-effective solution for your organization.
Very nice, William. I know we all appreciate a straightforward pricing structure. Thank you. And Vinay, this question's for you. They're asking, do you have any file service solutions that customers can leverage?
That's a great question. Actually, a lot of VDI customers need those file services. So what we've done is we actually partnered with a company called Cetera, which provides a global file system that allows customers to actually have their file share running on top of SimpliVity, but also available to all the VDI workers. And actually, what we have done is we've collaborated with them to create an offering wherein every customer gets up to 4 terabytes of on-prem free file services, and also Cetera provides an ability to have your files accessible through a public cloud platform, and we provide that as a free offering for 3 months for up to 10 terabytes. So a great solution with Cetera to provide file services on top of SimpliVity as well.
Very nice. Thanks, Vinay. Now, William, this one's for you. They're asking, how do I know if I need only backups or a complete disaster recovery solution?
Sometimes it's hard to decide whether your organization just needs an offsite copy of your data, or if you need a comprehensive always-on data protection or disaster recovery solution. And ultimately, that comes down to you and your business determining what your recovery time objective looks like. So ultimately, you have the ability to control a few basic metrics when you're talking about offsite data protection. Recovery time objective, or how fast you want your data to be active or your application to be online again, and your recovery point objective, talking about how much data you can potentially lose if a major outage occurs. With Veeam solutions, the recovery point objectives are similar between backup and disaster recovery. That will change in the future, but ultimately you're getting kind of a consistent RPO between the two solutions. But the recovery time objective can change dramatically. If you have a large data set and you park it in an offsite data storage powered by Veeam, it can take a long time to get that data back up and running. If you need to be up in a few hours or even 24 hours, you should definitely look at a disaster recovery as a service solution. And anything under 24 hours, you really have to consider always on data protection or disaster recovery as a solution, because that data is sitting there on production SANs, ready to be booted and made live, and for you to log in and reconfigure your applications and make sure they work. So it's a complicated process and problem. It's something that you need to talk to your business stakeholders about, make sure everybody's on the same page, and just choose the one that's best for your organization.
Very insightful, William. Thank you. And final question, back to you, William, again. They're asking, how fast can I recover my data with Veeam and Phoenix Snap in the case of a disaster?
Phoenix Snap's disaster recovery as a service solutions powered by Veeam offer a very robust recovery time objective. So when you're looking at how quickly can you spin up your virtual machines that you're replicating to our environment, from the time that you initiate the failover or the disaster recovery startup process to the time that those VMs are online, in most scenarios, is minutes. So, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, depending on the number of VMs that you have. It's really short minutes. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer for you to get into those VMs, make sure that your applications are working and functioning, perform some type of network failover from an internet perspective so that your users can reach those applications. But we have a ton of customers that have aggressive sub 2 hour, sub 4 hour recovery time objectives. And during the testing that they do, they're easily able to meet those.
Excellent answer, William. And thank you so much to you at Phoenix Snap. And of course, thank you to Vinay at HPE as well for all the excellent answers. It was a great Q&A session. And with that, let's wrap up today's event. And with that, it's now time for our final gift card announcements here. We have 2 more Amazon $100 gift cards, and these are going out to, looks like Randy Rebekowski, sorry, I'm mispronouncing it. Randy from Wisconsin and Gang Young from Hawaii. Congratulations, Randy from Wisconsin, Gang from Hawaii, and Dick from California, our 3 gift card winners on today's Gorilla Guide webisode. Before you go, don't forget to join us on an upcoming event. After this event, you'll be automatically redirected to our events landing page. Next week, we'll be hosting the last megacast of 2021, the Data Protection, Disaster Recovery as a Service, and Disaster Recovery Megacast with Clumio, Rubrik, Druva, Faction, and HubStore, also giving away 5 Mac Minis. Hope to see you there. I hope everyone has a great weekend. Hope you enjoyed the Gorilla Guide webisode today on securing a remote workforce. Have a great day. Bye-bye.